An unlikely encounter. The neon lights of Nebulon 5's bustling spaceport flickered as dusk fell, casting elongated shadows that danced along the metallic hulls of docked spacecraft. Among these, the Stardust, a sleek vessel known for its speed and elegance, sat quietly, its polished exterior reflecting the chaos of the busy port. Jack, with his weathered pilot's jacket and confident stride, navigated through the crowd, his mind on the upcoming solo journey that would take him beyond the outer rim. But as he approached his ship, he noticed the access panel to the cockpit was ajar, a clear sign that something was amiss. "Not today," Jack muttered under his breath as he quickened his pace. As he reached the Stardust, he heard the faint sounds of someone tampering inside. Without hesitation, he climbed aboard, his heart racing with a mixture of anger and adrenaline. Inside the cockpit, he found her, hunched over the controls with her delicate fingers flying over the dashboard in a desperate attempt to start the ship. She was slight, with iridescent skin that shimmered under the cockpit's lights, and her large, luminous eyes shot up to meet his as he entered. "What do you think you're doing?" Jack demanded, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. The girl looked up at him, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "Please," she stammered, her voice soft but urgent, "I need to take this ship. It's important." Jack paused, taken aback by her plea. "Important enough to steal? Who are you?" "My name is Lyra," she replied, her gaze never wavering. "I'm from Crix. I didn't want to do this, but I had no choice." Jack's initial anger waned slightly, replaced by curiosity. "Crix? That's a peaceful sector. What's so urgent there?" "It's my people," Lyra said, her eyes welling up with tears. "There's a threat that no one else sees. I need to get back. There are people who need me." Jack studied her for a moment. She seemed genuine, and there was a sincerity in her eyes that was hard to fake. "And you thought stealing my ship was the best way to get help?" he asked, his tone softening. Lyra nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I have money. I can pay you. Please, I just need to get there quickly." Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. The situation was far from simple, but something in her desperate plea resonated with him. He made a quick decision. "All right, I'll take you there," he said, surprising even himself. "But on one condition. You're not the pilot I am." Lyra's face brightened, a smile breaking through her worry. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I won't forget this." Jack nodded, settling into the pilot's seat. "We'll sort out your story on the way. For now, strap in. It's going to be a long ride." As the engines of the Stardust roared to life, the unlikely pair set off into the star-studded expanse, their journey together just beginning. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this trip was going to change more than just the course of his solitary life. It might just alter the fate of an entire planet. Chapter 2. Words of Water. The Stardust cruised through the velvety darkness of space, the hum of its engines a constant backdrop to an uneasy silence. Jack focused on the navigation charts, plotting a course to Crix, while Lyra sat beside him, her gaze fixed on the starry abyss outside the viewport. "So, Lyra, tell me more about this threat to your people." Jack finally broke the silence, glancing at her with an inquisitive eye. Lyra turned, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the dashboard. "It's a bit complicated. Crix is known for its tranquility, yes, but recently there have been disturbances. Someone, or something, is manipulating the water supply." "Water? That's your planet's life source, isn't it?" Jack asked, recalling the briefings he'd read about Quirixian planets. "Yes, exactly," Lyra nodded vigorously. "Our entire ecosystem depends on the equilibrium of our waters. Without it, not only the flora and fauna suffer, but our people begin to get sick as well." Jack frowned. How come no one else has noticed this? Seems like a pretty big deal. That's just it. The changes are subtle, slow, and our leading council is under the influence of those who are behind this. Anyone who dares to speak out vanishes. Lyra's voice trailed off, shrouded in fear. Jack leaned back in his seat, processing her words. "All right, I'm with you so far. What's your plan?" Before Lyra could respond, a sudden alert from the ship's console interrupted them. Jack swiftly checked the readings. "Looks like we've got company. Another ship is tailing us." Lyra peered at the radar. "That's them. They must not want me getting back with help." Jack's hands moved over the controls with practiced ease. "Hold on, I'm going to try and shake them." The stardust lurched as Jack executed a series of sharp maneuvers, the stars outside swirling into blurs. Amid the chaos, a calm voice crackled over the comlink. "Unknown vessel, this is Commander Rail of the Galactic Patrol. We are here to escort you to Crix." Jack exchanged a surprised look with Lyra before responding. "Commander Rail, this is Jack with passenger Lyra of Crix. We appreciate the escort, but why the sudden interest?" Commander Rail's voice was steady and reassuring. "We received a distress signal from someone claiming to be a Quirixian royal, alleging a conspiracy. We're here to ensure you reach Crix safely and to investigate these claims." Lyra sighed with relief, a weight lifting from her shoulders. "Thank you, Commander. We're in your hands." With the Galactic Patrol now flanking them, Jack eased the Stardust into a more relaxed speed. He glanced at Lyra, noticing the tension fade from her expression. "Looks like you've got some powerful friends," Jack remarked. Lyra smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Well, maybe I exaggerated my influence a bit to get their attention. But it worked, didn't it?" Jack laughed, the sound filling the cockpit and easing the remnants of tension. "I'll say. But from here on out, let's keep the surprises to a minimum, okay?" "Agreed," Lyra chuckled, her spirits lifted by their new allies. As the Stardust and its escort continued their journey towards Crix, Jack and Lyra began to plan their next steps, their partnership strengthened by the shared goal of uncovering the truth and protecting her home planet. The stars seemed to shine a bit brighter, the path ahead clear and hopeful. Chapter 3. The Flight to Crix. The Stardust, accompanied by the protective ships of the Galactic Patrol, continued its journey through space, the sleek silver hull gleaming against the backdrop of the cosmos. Inside the cockpit, Jack and Lyra were joined by Commander Rail via hologram, who floated before them like a spectre from another world. "Commander Rail," Jack greeted, nodding towards the hologram. "We appreciate the escort. How secure is our passage to Crix?" Rail's image flickered as he adjusted his position, his expression serious. "It's as secure as we can make it without drawing too much attention. However, your arrival on Crix will raise eyebrows. We need to have a solid plan in place." Lyra leaned forward, her face set with determination. "We need to meet with my father discreetly. He's surrounded by council members who are in on the conspiracy. If we can show him the evidence we've gathered, he can help us expose the culprits." Jack rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "And how do you suggest we gather this evidence without getting caught?" "They'll be watching for any unusual activity, especially from you." "That's where I come in," interjected Rail. "My team can create a diversion. While they're busy handling that, we can conduct our investigation quietly." Jack considered this, then turned to Lyra. "Sounds like a plan. But we need to be extremely careful. These aren't small-time crooks. They're powerful enough to corrupt a government." Lyra nodded in agreement. "I know the risks. But I trust you both." As the conversation concluded, Jack turned his attention back to piloting, feeling the weight of their mission. The next few hours passed in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, preparing for what was to come. Upon entering Quirix's orbit, the beauty of the planet unfolded before them through the viewport. Lush green continents surrounded by vast blue oceans sparkled under the white light of Quirix's twin suns. It was a paradise at risk of devastation, and the irony wasn't lost on Jack. As they descended, Rail's team executed their plan. A series of minor but attention-grabbing technical malfunctions were reported at various governmental facilities, pulling the security forces thin. "We're clear to land at these coordinates." Rail's voice came through the calm. "It's a private landing pad owned by a trusted ally." The Stardust touched down gently on the pad, hidden amongst the dense foliage of one of Quirix's vast rainforests. Jack powered down the engines and turned to Lyra. "This is it. Ready?" Lyra nodded, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. "Let's do this." They disembarked and were met by one of Rail's contacts, a tall, burly Quirixian named Talos. His warm smile was welcoming. "Lyra, it's good to see you safe. Follow me. Your father is waiting." They trekked through thick underbrush until they reached a secluded cabin built around a massive tree trunk. The door opened before they could knock, and there stood Lyra's father, his expression a mix of relief and worry. "Lyra!" he exclaimed, pulling her into a tight embrace. Then he turned to Jack and Talos, nodding gratefully. "Thank you for bringing my daughter back." They quickly moved inside, where Lyra unfolded the map and began detailing their plan. Her father listened intently, his brow furrowed in concern. With everyone's role clear, they ended their meeting with a unified sense of purpose. As Jack and Lyra prepared to leave, her father took her hands in his. "Be careful, my child." Lyra smiled reassuringly. "We will be." Back at the Stardust, Jack and Lyra reviewed every step of their plan. "Once we start, there's no turning back," Jack said, locking eyes with Lyra. "You sure you're up for this?" Lyra placed her hand on Jack's. "More than ever. Let's save Quirix." As night fell over the rainforest, the two of them prepared to set out on their crucial mission, the fate of an entire world hanging in the balance. Chapter 4. Secrets of the Spheres. The night cloaked their movements as Jack and Lyra, along with Talos, approached the governmental district of Quirix. The buildings loomed like silent giants under the twin moons, their facades bathed in a soft, eerie light. The trio moved stealthily, communicating with hushed whispers. "We need to access the main water control center. That's where they monitor the entire planet's water supply," Lyra explained as they ducked behind a storage facility. "The evidence should be there." Jack nodded, pulling up the building schematics on a handheld device. "There are security cameras everywhere." "Talos, you think you can handle the tech?" Talos, with a confident grin, responded, "Leave it to me. I've been itching to put my new scramblers to the test." As they made their way closer, a sudden crackle in their earpieces signaled Rail's voice. "Be alert. There's been an increase in patrol activity tonight. Seems they might be onto something." "Understood," Jack murmured back. "We'll keep our eyes open." Reaching the perimeter of the water control center, they watched as Talos set up a small, sophisticated device that emitted a low hum. Within seconds, the area's security feeds flickered and went dark. "Cameras are down. You have approximately 15 minutes before they reboot the system," Talos whispered, ushering them forward. Inside, the center was a maze of corridors lined with pipes and wires. Jack led, with Lyra closely behind him, pointing out directions to the central hub based on her prior knowledge. "Here," she said, stopping in front of a secure door. "The files we need are in there." Jack examined the lock, then glanced at Talos. I'm guessing this is a bit beyond the Scrambler's capabilities? Just a bit, Talos chuckled softly, pulling out a set of lock picks. Old school it is. With deft fingers, Talos worked the lock as Jack and Lyra kept watch. After a tense minute, a soft click echoed in the corridor, and the door swung open. They entered a room filled with screens displaying real-time data of Quirix's water sources. Lyra went straight to the main console, her fingers dancing over the holographic keys as she searched for the incriminating evidence. "Got it," she breathed, pulling up files that showed unauthorized chemical distributions and unexplained alterations in water levels. "This is it. This is what we need." Jack, looking over her shoulder, nodded. "Let's download everything." As the data transferred, a sudden sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. "We've got company," Jack hissed, drawing a small blaster. Talos moved to the door, peering out cautiously. "It's the night shift guards. Looks like the camera blackout tipped them off," Talos reported, turning to them. "We need to move now." With the data secured on a portable drive, they hurried out of the room, retracing their steps through the winding corridors. They were almost clear when a shout rang out behind them. "Stop! Intruders!" a guard yelled, spotting their retreating figures. The chase was on. They dashed through the complex, dodging security personnel and navigating the labyrinthine layout with Lyra's guidance. Just as they neared the exit, a stun blast shot past them, striking the wall ahead with a sizzle. Jack returned fire, providing cover as Talos and Lyra pushed through the final door into the cool night air. Breathless and hearts pounding, they sprinted back to the safety of the rainforest where Rail awaited with their escape vehicle. Once safely away, hidden under the dense canopy, Rail greeted them. "Did you get what you needed?" Lyra, clutching the drive, nodded emphatically. "We got more than enough." As they drove back to their rendezvous point, the seriousness of their mission settled in. They had the evidence to expose a planetary conspiracy, but the hardest part was yet to come, bringing it to light without further endangering the innocent lives of Quirix. Jack glanced at Lyra, seeing the mix of fear and resolve on her face. "We'll get through this," he reassured her, a silent promise to protect her and her planet at all costs. Chapter 5: Subterfuge and Shadows. Back at their secluded cabin, the team gathered around the holographic display of the evidence they had secured. The room buzzed with a tense energy as each member digested the implications of the data. "We need to act fast," Jack asserted, scanning the room for consensus. "The longer we wait, the more time they have to cover their tracks." Lyra nodded, her eyes fixed on the images of contaminated water reserves. "We should present this to the Galactic Council. They have the authority to intervene directly." Rail, leaning against the wall, folded his arms. "It's not that simple. The Council will require a formal hearing, and that could take weeks. We need a more immediate solution." Talos, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. "What about a public broadcast? Leak the evidence to the media. Once it's out, they can't simply ignore it." Jack considered this, tapping his fingers on the table. "It's risky. If we tip our hand too soon, we might spook them into drastic actions." The room fell into a thoughtful silence, each member considering the weight of their next steps. It was Lyra's father who finally broke the stillness. "There is a broadcast station not far from here. It's small but has a wide reach. I know the director. He is a loyal friend." Lyra looked at her father, a glint of resolve in her eyes. "Let's do it. Let's take the truth to the people directly." Jack nodded in agreement. "All right. We'll need to plan carefully. Security will be tight, even at a small station." The group spent the next hours meticulously planning their move. They decided to split into two teams, one to secure the station and another to handle the broadcast. As night fell, they moved out. Jack, Lyra, and her father headed to the broadcast station, while Rael and Talos worked on creating a diversion to draw security away from their target. Upon reaching the station, Jack surveyed the area. "Looks quiet. Too quiet." Lyra's father approached the back entrance, where he used his old security codes to gain access. Inside, they were met by the director, a wiry man with keen eyes. "I've been expecting you," he said, shaking Lyra's father's hand. "We have everything set up as you requested." They moved to the control room, where Lyra prepared her statement. Jack stood by her side, checking his communicator for updates from Rael. "Are we ready?" Lyra asked, her voice steady despite the palpable tension. Jack gave a reassuring nod. "We're set. Go on when you're ready." The broadcast went live, and Lyra began to speak, her words echoing out across the planet. She detailed the conspiracy with clarity and urgency, showcasing the damning evidence of the corrupted water supply. As she spoke, Jack monitored the station's security feeds. "We've got incoming," he warned, noting the approach of security forces. Lyra continued, her voice a beacon of truth as she implored her people to demand accountability and justice. The station's doors burst open as security forces stormed in, but they were too late. The message had been sent, the evidence shown to the world. Jack, Lyra, and her father were detained, but their spirits remained unbroken, buoyed by the success of their broadcast. As they were escorted away, Lyra's father whispered, "You did well, my daughter. No matter what comes next." In the detention center, Jack, Lyra, and her father sat together, their future uncertain but their conscience clear. They had ignited a spark of change, one that promised to cleanse Carix of its shadows at last. Chapter 6. The Gala of Galaxies. The dim hum of an anti-grav car filled the quiet night as Jack and Lyra approached Quirix's Grand Nexus, the largest and most opulent structure on the planet. The building shimmered with lights as dignitaries from across the galaxy gathered for the annual Gala of Galaxies. The gala was a celebration of interplanetary unity and trade, but tonight it would serve a very different purpose. Inside the car, Lyra adjusted her flowing silver gown, her usual confidence tempered by the gravity of their mission. "I still can't believe we're doing this," she said, glancing at Jack, who was busy adjusting his disguised comm unit embedded in the cuff of his suit. Jack smirked. "You wanted the evidence out there, and we did that. Now, this is the part where we make sure the right people act on it." Beside them sat Talos, wearing a security guard's uniform, and Rael, dressed as a visiting dignitary. They were the support team, ready to act if things went wrong. "Remember," Rael said, his voice steady, "our primary goal is to get Lyra in front of the council delegates. Once she speaks, the rest of us will handle any interference." Jack nodded. "Got it. Just keep the exits clear in case we need a quick getaway." As they stepped out of the car and onto the marble steps of the Grand Nexus, the grandeur of the event hit them. The towering columns of the entrance were adorned with cascading lights, and the air buzzed with the hum of conversations in dozens of languages. Aliens of every shape and size mingled, their exotic attire adding to the vibrant scene. "You sure you're ready for this?" Jack whispered to Lyra as they approached the entrance. She turned to him, her expression firm. "I don't have a choice. My people need me." Inside the hall, chandeliers floated mid-air, refracting light across the crowd. Tables were laden with delicacies from across the galaxy, and music from a Quirixian string ensemble filled the air. The gala was a spectacle of diplomacy and indulgence, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling of tension simmering beneath the surface. Rael slipped away to mingle with the crowd, while Talos positioned himself near the service entrance, keeping an eye on security. Jack and Lyra made their way toward the central dais, where the council delegates were seated. "Stick close to me," Jack said under his breath, scanning the crowd for any signs of danger. As they neared the dais, a voice stopped them. Miss Lyra, a tall Quirixian man with sharp features and a forced smile, stepped into their path. "I wasn't expecting to see you here tonight." "Counselor Narek," Lyra replied coolly, her body tensing. "I thought it would be inappropriate to miss such an important gathering." Jack immediately recognized the name. Narek was one of the key figures implicated in the corruption scandal. His presence was both a threat and an opportunity. Narek's eyes flicked to Jack. "And who is this?" "Your escort, Jack." He introduced himself with a grin. "Just here to make sure she stays out of trouble." Narek's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, enjoy the evening. I'm sure it will be unforgettable." With that, he melted back into the crowd. Lyra exhaled sharply once Narek was gone. "He knows something. We need to act quickly." They reached the dais, where Rael was already engaged in conversation with a group of delegates. He nodded subtly as Jack and Lyra approached. "Counselor Eridan," Rael said, addressing a stout alien with bright orange skin. "May I introduce Lyra of Crix? She has something urgent to share with the Council." Eridan looked skeptical but intrigued. "This is hardly the place for politics." Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. "Counselor, I have evidence of a conspiracy that threatens the very foundation of Crix. Please, give me a moment of your time." Eridan hesitated, then gestured for her to continue. As Lyra began to speak, Jack's attention was drawn to a group of security personnel moving toward them. He tapped his calm, "Talos, we've got incoming." "Copy that," Talos replied. "I'm in position if things go south." Lyra's voice rang out across the hall as more delegates turned their attention to her. She detailed the evidence they had uncovered, projecting holographic images from a small device hidden in her bracelet. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the scale of the corruption became clear. "This is unacceptable," one delegate shouted, rising from their seat. "We must act immediately." Before the council could respond, Narek reappeared, flanked by security officers. "This is a breach of protocol," he declared, his voice cold. "Arrest them." Jack stepped forward, blocking Narek's path. "You might want to think twice about that," he said, his tone icy. "This whole room just saw the truth. You really think you can cover it up now?" The tension in the room was palpable as the delegates began to murmur among themselves. Eridan stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Counselor Narek, these accusations are serious. Until we've investigated further, I suggest you step down from your position." Narek's face twisted with fury, but he had no choice. He gestured for his guards to stand down and stormed out of the hall. As the crowd began to disperse, Jack turned to Lyra. "You did it." She smiled, the relief evident on her face. "We did it." Rael approached, clapping Jack on the shoulder. "Nice work. Let's get out of here before Narek decides to make another move." They slipped out of the Grand Nexus, blending into the night. Their mission wasn't over, but for the first time, they had the upper hand. As they walked back to their transport, Jack and Lyra exchanged a look, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had forged through their shared fight for justice. Chapter 7. Echoes of Betrayal. The victory at the Grand Nexus had given them a moment's reprieve, but the fight was far from over. Back at the safe house, the air was thick with tension. Jack, Lyra, Rael, and Talos gathered around a holotable, reviewing the fallout of their dramatic exposure of the water corruption on Crix. "It's working," Talos said, his voice a rare note of optimism. "Public outcry is growing by the hour. People are demanding change. That's not enough, Rael said. Nerek may be in retreat, but his allies won't just give up. We need to keep the pressure on. Lyra leaned forward, her brows knit in concentration. We have more data, don't we? Evidence of financial transactions, communications between Nerek's inner circle. We need to release it all. Jack shook his head. If we flood the public with too much at once, we risk overwhelming them. We need to be strategic. So what's the next step? Talos asked, crossing his arms. Before anyone could answer, the holo display flickered. A message appeared. Incoming transmission. Private encryption key. Rael frowned and tapped the console. The figure that materialized was a familiar one. Lyra's old mentor, Kale. Kale. Lyra's voice carried a mix of surprise and relief. I didn't think we'd hear from you. Kale's image was shadowed, his expression grim. Lyra, I have to warn you. There's a mole in your circle. Someone's been feeding Nerek's people information. The room went silent. Jack's hand instinctively moved toward the blaster at his side. How do you know? He asked. Intercepted comms, Kale replied. Nerek's still getting intelligence on your movements. I don't know who it is, but someone close to you is reporting back to him. Rael's jaw tightened. That would explain how they're always one step ahead. It's not just luck. Lyra looked at each of them, her eyes filled with uncertainty. We've trusted everyone here with our lives. How could any of us betray the cause? Kale's image flickered again. I don't have names, only the proof of leaks. Be cautious. If you find out who it is, act quickly. Nerek's forces are regrouping. The transmission ended, leaving the group in uneasy silence. Talos finally spoke, his tone uncharacteristically serious. We can't ignore this. If there's a traitor, we're all at risk. Jack nodded. Agreed. But we can't start pointing fingers without evidence. We need to handle this quietly. Keep our eyes open. Rael rubbed his temple, his frustration evident. Fine. But we have to move forward. Let's set up the next release of data and keep a close watch. Whoever the mole is, they'll slip up. Lyra, still visibly shaken, stood. I'll start sorting through our files, see if anything looks out of place. As the others dispersed to their tasks, Jack caught up with Lyra outside the main room. Hey, he said softly. You okay? She turned to him, her expression conflicted. How can I be? Someone we trust is working against us. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll figure it out. Don't let it tear you apart. Just focus on the mission. Lyra looked up at him, a faint smile breaking through her worry. Thanks, Jack, for always having my back. Always, he replied, the sincerity in his voice unmistakable. Over the next few days, tensions within the group simmered beneath the surface. Every action was carefully monitored, every conversation weighed for hidden meaning. Jack and Talos worked together on their next data release, cross-checking files and double-encrypting their comms. Rael stayed in the background, quietly observing everyone. Lyra buried herself in the evidence, searching for patterns that might reveal the traitor. She and Jack often found themselves working late into the night, their conversations shifting from strategy to more personal topics. Jack shared stories of his travels before Carix, while Lyra spoke of her childhood, of her father's teachings and her dreams for her planet's future. One night, as they reviewed the data logs, Lyra hesitated. Jack, do you ever think about what happens after all this? When the fight is over? Jack leaned back in his chair, considering her question. Hard to say. I guess I'll go back to flying, find some quiet corner of the galaxy. "And leave all this behind?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. He met her gaze. Maybe not all of it. Their connection hung in the air, unspoken but deeply felt. Jack reached out, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "We'll get through this, Lyra. One way or another." As the days turned into nights, their bond grew stronger. Even with the shadow of betrayal looming over them, they found solace in each other's company. It wasn't just about the mission anymore. It was about survival, trust, and the possibility of something more once the dust settled. But the truth about the traitor would come out soon, and when it did, everything they had worked for, and their newfound connection, would be tested like never before. Chapter 8. Stars of Freedom. The final confrontation began not with a battle, but with a revelation. As the team regrouped in the hidden bunker, Jack glanced around at the familiar faces. Lyra, who had become the heart of their mission, Rael, who had risked his position to stand with them, and Talos, who now wore a guarded expression. Jack spoke first, his tone calm but firm. "We need to address this now. Kale's warning wasn't baseless. There's a mole among us, and we can't move forward until we know who it is." Rael leaned back against the console, crossing his arms. "So how do we figure it out? If we start accusing each other without proof, we'll tear ourselves apart." Lyra hesitated, then stepped forward. "I've been looking at our communication logs. I think I found something. One of our secure channels was accessed from a location outside of our group's known movements." Talos raised an eyebrow. "And you think that's enough to pin it on someone? Couldn't it just be a random technical error?" Jack shook his head. "We triple encrypted those channels. It's not an error. It's someone deliberately feeding information to Narek's forces." Lyra turned to Rael. "You've been our liaison with the Galactic Council. Have you noticed anything off? Any strange questions from their side?" Rael frowned. "Not directly. But there's been an increase in encrypted messages on their end. Maybe someone's relaying our plans through them." "Then we need to intercept one of those transmissions," Talos said, stepping closer. "We can use it to trace the source." Jack nodded. "Agreed. Rael, can you monitor their channels from here?" Rael moved to the console, his fingers flying over the keys. "Give me a few minutes. If they send something soon, I might be able to pinpoint where it's coming from." As Rael worked, the tension in the room thickened. Jack caught Lyra's gaze and gave her a small nod, a silent reassurance. She offered a faint smile in return, though her eyes remained heavy with worry. Minutes passed like hours until Rael finally spoke up. "Got it." An outgoing transmission just left their network, routed through a relay station. "The coordinates match one of our old safe houses." Lyra stiffened. "That safe house. We haven't used it in weeks. Who would still be accessing it?" Jack turned to the group. "Only one way to find out. We go there. Now." The team moved quickly, gathering their gear and heading to the transport. The ride was silent, the weight of suspicion hanging over them. As they approached the safe house, Jack motioned for everyone to stay alert. "We go in together, no splitting up." The safe house was dark, its exterior showing no signs of recent activity. Jack and Talos led the way, with Lyra and Rael close behind. Inside, the air was stale, the rooms as untouched as they'd left them, except for the main console, which was still active, its screen glowing faintly. Talos inspected the console. "Someone was here recently. The logs confirm it." Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. "Can you trace who accessed it?" Talos worked for a moment, then cursed under his breath. "They wiped most of the logs. But wait. There's a partial fragment left. It matches Rael's encryption key. Everyone turned to Rael, who froze. His face betrayed a mix of shock and something else, guilt. "Rael," Lyra said softly, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Why?" Rael looked away, then sighed heavily. "It's not what you think. Narek approached me weeks ago, before we even started the Gala mission. He threatened my family, said he'd have them killed if I didn't cooperate." Jack's grip on his blaster tightened, but he didn't raise it. "So you've been feeding him our plans all along?" "Not all of them," Rael said quickly, his voice desperate. "Only small pieces, just enough to keep my family safe. I never meant for it to go this far." Lyra stepped closer, her gaze piercing. "Do you realize what you've done? People are suffering because of the corruption we're trying to stop, and you've helped it continue." Rael lowered his head. "I know. I was wrong. But I never thought. I just wanted to protect them." Jack stared at Rael for a long moment before speaking. "Lyra, what do you want to do?" Lyra took a deep breath, then looked back at Jack. "We can't trust him any more. But I don't want to turn him over to Narek's forces. He should stand trial for his actions, publicly, where everyone can see what happens to traitors and how justice is served." Jack nodded. "Agreed. Rael, you're coming with us. No more side deals, no more sabotage." Rael nodded slowly, his expression resigned. "I'll cooperate. Just, please, let me explain everything when we get back." The journey back was tense but quiet. When they reached the safe house, they turned Rael over to the local authorities, ensuring that his betrayal would be brought to light in a proper court. With Rael gone, the remaining team stood together in the dim light of the bunker. Lyra looked at Jack, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you for trusting me to make that decision." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're in this together, remember?" As the stars shimmered outside, the team felt the weight of their mission shift. They had lost an ally but gained clarity. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in weeks, they felt ready to face it.